one of the things that we have incorporated in TreadWill is that it is targeted to an Indian audience, right? So it's not the stress itself, but how we respond to the stress that leads to the mental health disorder. So yeah, I mean, our goal is to really help them deal with the stress in a healthy manner.
Biopatrika, your very own online science communication brings science closer to you in many ways. Today, Sci Connect by Biopatrika welcomes all science enthusiasts to our Mental Health Awareness and Acknowledgement podcast. I, Sreyashree Bose, and my co-host Prince Kumar are super excited to converse and learn more about mental health from our today's podcast guest, Orko. Orko, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Arka is a final year PhD student at the Department of Biological Sciences and Bioengineering, IIT Kanpur, where he is working at the lab of neural systems under the supervision of Dr. Nitin Gupta. He completed his B.Tech in electrical engineering at IIT Roorkee. Arka is interested in understanding and treating mood disorders. During his PhD, he has created TreadWill, a progressive web application for helping individuals with symptoms of depression and anxiety. Arka and his team are conducting clinical trials to evaluate the effectiveness of TreadWill. A clinical trial performed using an earlier version of TreadWill has shown its effectiveness in reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety. Arka's ultimate goal is to do something useful in the domain of mental health. Thank you, Arka, for joining us in our podcast today, and we look ahead to talking to you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Arka, you started off as a pure science-oriented student, willing to figure out the signals behind anxiety and depression. So I was just wondering what motivated you to switch your track and you went ahead exploring mental health. So could you tell a little bit about it?
To be clear, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I started out. So I just came with an open mind to Nitin's lab. He was just starting out his lab.
Yeah.
And one of his main focus area was really electrophysiology on insect olfaction.
Right.
But he told me that he also wanted to do something related to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really have any background. So initially he asked me to do literature review to see what can be done in this area in India. Given the, so this was 2014. So now there is a lot of awareness about mental health, even in India, but at that time it was quite low.
Right.
So, I mean, we just started looking and, I checked on autism, other developmental disorders, dyslexia and all that. And eventually we narrowed in on depression because, I mean, I found it very interesting and I found it very relatable from my undergraduate experience and from the experiences that my friends used to have during those times. I mean, I didn't know what was going on, but after reading the literature on depression and so cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a therapy for depression, I found it very relatable. So I decided to work on that.
That's great motivation. Arko, we are very curious to learn more about your app, TreadWill. So could you please share a little bit more about this app, like maybe how you came up with the idea and what the app is all about?
The core therapeutic approach in the app is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic scientific principle behind that is that depression, anxiety, and many other mental health disorders are disorders of thinking. Like, let's say two students do poorly in a test, or let's say fail a test. They might have different reactions to that. You must have seen it in your own experience. When two of your friends do poorly in tests, someone can just brush it off. They just say it was a bad day or the question was hard or something like that.
Right.
But someone else might take it personally. I mean, they think that it was my fault, that I am stupid or something like that.
Right.
So the premise behind cognitive behavioral therapy is that it's not the external events that are responsible for depression, but how we interpret them. that's the idea. And the therapeutic approach is to help people understand how they interpret external events, what is their particular way of thinking, and how that thinking can be modified to interpret events in a more balanced way.
Right.
It's not just about, let's say, positive thinking, but it's a more balanced way. I mean, you want to call a spade, but it's not always as bad as some people think it to be.
Right.
So that's the idea. So that's the cognitive part, and the behavioral part is really to, to put it in a very loose way. It's to just go ahead with your life, irrespective of what else is happening to you. Just, socialize, do exercise, maintain a healthy lifestyle. Yeah.
Right. So just like by the way you explained your app, like I was just interested to know, will it be more effective right after I had some exposure to some bad incident, or even after a prolonged time after had an exposure to a bad incident? So let us say I had a test, I didn't do good in it. So will it be more effective to me that I come to your app right away, or will it be equally effective if I go through it like after a couple of days or week eventually?
People who have this kind of thinking,
right?
So these are, to put it in scientific terms, it's a distorted pattern of thinking.
Okay.
So if they have that sort of thinking for one event, they generally tend to have it for pretty much everything in their life. So in the app, we ask you to think about your personal experiences. So you're most likely to think of something recent.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, whatever is weighing in on your mind at that particular time.
Right.
So you're most probably going to think of that. And if that's a test or something, some conflict you had with a friend or a partner, the idea is to just get them to realize this pattern of thinking rather than the event itself. It's the pattern of thinking that you have that is causing the trouble.
That's great. So Arka, thank you so much for sharing about TreadWill. So what do you think are the major strengths of this app, maybe in fighting depression and anxiety across the different age groups that you're targeting right now?
So one of the things that we have incorporated in TreadWill is that it is targeted to an Indian audience.
Okay. Yeah.
So CBT has been developed in USA, and most of the apps and the websites that you will find targets an Western audience, developed countries people.
Right.
So and the examples they have to teach them about the cognitive model, which is central to cognitive behavioral therapy, are all examples from the Western world. So we have changed all those examples to make it relatable to an Indian audience. And our target age group is 18 to 35. So we have given examples about that they can relate to, basically, and a college student or a working professional or a young adult can relate to. So that, I think, is one of the best aspects of TreadWill.
That was really wonderful to hear about TreadWill and its strength. So on a personal ground, I'm a little interested in asking you something very different. So it was a complete transition, right? You moved from electrical engineering to altogether to a mental health domain. And you must not be having an in-depth knowledge about this area to begin with, right? So I'm basically very impressed by your transition, and I would like to know, like, how did you decide to do this? Like, and was it that you were not enjoying the core electrical engineering, or was you more inclined to do something else? So basically, I'm interested in knowing what was that transition phase in your life where you decided that I have to do this, and how did you decide to choose your mentor and go with this kind of project? So what was that?
So I'll give you the long answer.
Sure.
Starting from my undergraduate. So I did my undergraduate in electrical engineering, and to be perfectly honest, I didn't enjoy it. Some courses I liked, but most of it I didn't really enjoy it. But still interested in studying, so I studied and scored good grades and all that. And right after my graduation from undergraduate, I got a job at a software development company. But even during my undergraduate, I wanted to do a PhD. I wanted to stay in academia, but I didn't know which field exactly to go into. And since I wasn't interested in electrical engineering, so I had an open mind really.
Okay.
And I did the job for about 3 months, and then came to IIT Kanpur in the electrical engineering department.
Right. Okay.
And there I worked at a lab for about 1.5 months.
Okay.
And I didn't enjoy that work either.
Right.
And so during that time, I was looking at profiles of others, people at IIT Kanpur, other professors, what kind of work they're doing. And I came across Nitin's profile.
Right.
And I found his work on bioinformatics interesting at that time, although I didn't have much experience in it, but I found it interesting. And I went to talk to him about whether he can give me a short project for an internship or something. And he agreed initially, but he also told me that he was interested in doing something on mental health. And he asked me to look into that. I started doing the literature review and liked this area, doing something on depression based on, since India has a huge population and the number of depressed people in India at any given point is more than 30 million.
Oh my God.
And the total mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and mental health workers, is about 9,000. So we thought that if we can make some scalable app available to the population, even if it can act as a first line of treatment. It certainly won't eradicate depression from India. Even if it helps significant percentage of the people, then it would be a huge contribution.
Right.
So that was the initial motivation. And on a personal level, I found it very interesting and relatable. And to be honest, I think I have had, although I have never been diagnosed, I think I have had episodes of depression during my undergraduate studies. So
what about during PhD?
Oh, my PhD goes without saying, but at least during my PhD, I knew what I was going through. But during my undergraduate, I had no idea what was happening to me.
Right.
And I didn't know that I could get help. So that is one of the biggest problems. Most people going through such episodes never realize that they need help or that they can get help.
Right. That was one of the most honest answers that I have ever heard. And thanks for being so honest with us. That will really be a good inspiration for our listeners. So here, I wanted to intervene a little more. So when you were doing your undergrad in electrical engineering, did you really have any elective courses from biology or neurology? Or you even took some courses at IIT Kanpur itself to train yourself?
So during the first year, we had a course on behavioral science.
Right.
And during my final year, I took another course on psychology. But during my PhD, since I joined initially as a master's student, in that elective, I took neurobiology. But since I joined the biological science department, so the courses I did during my PhD was all biology related.
That's all great. Thank you so much, Arka, for sharing so much about your professional and academic journey as well. We were very excited to actually read one of your paper about the clinical trial for delineating the pragmatic impact of your app. So we were wondering if you could share a little bit more about these clinical trials with our listeners, and also what were your major takeaways from the clinical trials?
So I'll just come to the later part of the question first. So TreadWill that we have created is fully automated, as in, there is no human involvement. The person comes to the site and reads whatever is there, goes through the material, and then applies the techniques of CBT on themselves.
Right.
Okay.
So the reason we had no human involvement is to make it scalable. So this kind of a software can be deployed to the entire country or entire world without any additional human overhead.
Right.
And even such a low human involvement software was able to help people reduce their depressive and anxiety symptoms. So that was one of the most encouraging findings that we had.
Right.
And for the design of clinical trials is pretty similar to how it's done in, for any clinical drug or software. Is we had experimental groups and control groups, and we gave different interventions to different groups and check who is doing significantly better than the other. Yeah, another interesting thing about our trial was that it was fully remote. As in, for other trials, for recruiting participants, you meet the participants and get them to do some questionnaires to see if they're eligible. That is to check their inclusion and exclusion criteria.
Yeah.
Speaking in scientific terms. But we did that remotely as well. I mean, the participant screening was also automated. So yeah, I mean, we just launched the software and everything. We just had to publicize it, and then interested participants joined, and whoever was eligible were given the interventions.
So was it a smooth phase getting the participants, or did you have a hard time finding the participants?
Well, it was hard. I would, if I'm honest.
Right.
So initially we started with IIT Kanpur itself.
Mm-hmm.
We used posters and flyers, and so we put up posters on all the halls, the departments. And since I have some contacts at IIT Roorkee, we got them to circulate some posters as well. And then one major help was the IIT Kanpur's media center, and so they helped us circulate a news article in Indian media.
Right.
Yes.
So that got us many participants, and then we use social media to circulate posts.
So there were participants. There were participants both from ITK and outside, right?
Yeah. Most of the participants, I think 80% of the participants were from outside of IITK. 20% were inside IITK.
Okay. No, so here, since I also belong from IIT Kanpur, so I had a quick follow-up on that, because most of the time when we were undergrad and we used to hear about anything like that, sometimes people used to participate not because they were willing to participate, but just to take a pinch of enjoyment out of it. You know what I'm saying? So they just used to fake their participation by some way or the other, and they used to fake their responses as well. So did you guys were aware about it, that people may do so, particularly in IT campus, and did you have a way to control it?
Certainly. We didn't have a way to control it other than looking at the data.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that is always the case in any online intervention or survey or anything, that people will be insincere in their participation, or some people, since this is a novel tool, so some people might just come to see what this is about and then drop out. So that is what happened to us as well. But since, I mean, our participation was, it would take someone at least 6 weeks to complete the entire intervention.
Right.
So an insincere participant won't come again and again. They will probably just come once, see what it is about, and then leave.
Right.
So, I mean, we had that control, that we only include participants who have done it for a certain number of days, or completed a certain number of modules.
Sure. Yeah.
So that would give us better data.
So I mean, now that we are talking, more about the participants, I actually was, curious to know. So suppose somebody joined this app, right, to be a part of your trial. So what will that person be expecting? Because you talk about the intervention. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what is going to be the expectation in the app? Just, to give a high level idea to our interested listeners, maybe.
So as I also said earlier, the primary thing that we are trying to teach them are techniques of cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
So which is, and we do that via examples that we think they will find relatable.
Right.
And there are some forms in cognitive behavioral therapy as well. So if you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they might ask you to fill those forms according to your experiences. So those forms are also there in the intervention.
Right.
And our goal really is to get them to be their own therapist eventually. So after, let's say, 6-7 weeks of repeated exposure to our material, we expect that they will develop some insight into their own thought process, and they will be able to identify their own negative thoughts and challenge their own negative thoughts.
Okay, no, that is very useful, right? So we had a quick question about multiple turnover attempts. So how robust do you think TreadWill's mechanism is in reducing anxiety in multiple turnover attempts? So meaning, can it help the same person with multiple occurrences of depression, with equal effectiveness, maybe every time he or she goes through that phase, or is it more or less effective, or only at a certain period of time, or things like that? Like, can a person keep on joining or gaining effectiveness of this app again and again?
Right. So that's a excellent question. We haven't tested that, whether the same participant can be helped again and again. So that particular question is still open. I don't know. I expect that it would. So what we did test in the trial was, so there was a follow-up period, as in, let's say someone uses the intervention for 6 months, and after their last usage, we wait for 90 days, and then we ask them again, how are you doing, using the questionnaires. So that was at that 90-day follow-up, it was still useful. The participants whose depression symptoms reduced, it was still reduced at 90 days follow-up.
Right.
But after that, we did not check that. But I expect that it would be helpful.
So like in your app, do you have an AI way of customizing the questions as per the human experience, or is it fixed for everyone?
No. So the questionnaires are standard in psychology, clinical psychology. So the one that we have used here is Patient Health Questionnaire 9, or PHQ9 in short.
Right.
So that is used for screening depression.
Okay.
So that we have used, that is common for everyone.
Yep.
The content, we do some tailoring based on the person's age and occupation and all that.
Right.
So a student sees a slightly different content than a working professional.
And you guys don't store the data of the participants, right? So is it completely anonymous, or do you have the data of the participants?
So those are really different things. Data can still be stored in an anonymized way, and we do store the data because we have to do the analysis. Otherwise, we wouldn't know whether it's working or not. So we do store the data, but we tell the participants that we will store your data and it will never be reported, or it would never be sold to an advertiser or anything.
Right.
Right.
But we will use it for data analysis and to check whether the site is working or not.
Right.
It's just for it's for your purpose, right? To analyze.
Right. Just for research purposes, not
research.
We are not going to sell it or anything.
I just got it from you that you said that you can self-treat yourself in a way if you are suffering from depression, right? So currently I'm seeing that most of the young generation have a great addiction towards machine interface, right? Computer interface. So I just wanted to know what you are bringing is it not another addition where people will be more dependent upon machine interface rather than human interface to lower down their depression or anxiety? So do you fear that it will have some negative outcomes in a long run, or do you think it's the direction that we must head towards?
So one thing is that the apps that people get addicted to, or the website, let's say Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, those are designed to be addictive.
Yep.
So it depends on the direction that the app chooses to go, and I sincerely hope that we won't have to go in that direction.
Is it something that you're thinking about it and aware of it while designing?
Certainly.
That? Right.
Certainly. We don't want the person to spend more and more screen time.
Yeah, that was so insightful, just learning how the concept, they have a whole business model surrounding the idea So stress, as we know, stress, depression it's very high, it's subjective in nature, right? It can depend upon several factors and scientifically speaking on several covariates. It might be socioeconomic factors, gender, faith, age, failures, what have you. So what is your strategy to maximize the incorporation of all these factors in your app? And I know that TreadWill comes up with different versions. So does that mean with each version you are changing the way you are incorporating these factors in your app as well?
Currently, we are targeting a particular demographic.
Right.
So we are not catering to adolescents or geriatric population as yet.
Mm-hmm.
And as for socioeconomic factors, also, I mean, we are, our potential participants, I would guess, are middle class, upper middle class.
Right.
Unfortunately, we are not yet targeting the people in the lower socioeconomic strata. I think that will require us a different approach than what we are currently using. But given this subset that we are targeting, again, the thing is to get them to understand their thought process. It's not, like I said earlier, it's not the event itself, but how they interpret the event that leads to depression or anxiety. So it's not the stress itself, but how we respond to the stress that leads to the mental health disorder. So yeah, I mean, our goal is to really help them deal with the stress in a healthy manner. That's what we are trying to do.
Oh, that's great. So Orko, what do you think is the future of this app? So as you said, right now you are targeting a specific population, right? A specific group. So in the future, do you foresee including different kinds of participants, maybe having different module within the same app catering to these different people? Right.
The direction in which it is moving is chatbot, right? So I mean, there it becomes very personalized then, because for a website, I mean, you can only tailor it so much, right? But a chatbot becomes, I mean, you write something that you're going through and the chatbot responds.
Now that we are talking a little bit about the future direction of the app, have you thought about including this app in the clinical space? Meaning, so in a sense that are you planning to collaborate with psychiatrists or therapists to test this app maybe for a more varied population, because they have an opportunity to interact maybe with the varied population firsthand?
Certainly. I mean, we did try that with the first version as well. And we did take help from the counseling service of IIT. The Indian Psychiatric Society has these annual conferences that I used to go to and interact with psychiatrists. And I asked them whether if they can help us recruit participants. But they said that, I mean, since they have that medical authority, if they recommend something to their patients, the patients would already believe that this has some validity.
Right.
And they can't do that until this has actually been validated in a clinical trial. So I'm expecting once these papers come out and we are able to show some evidence that this works, only then can we take it to say NIMHANS or AIMS and get participants and get the doctors interested. But that's certainly a direction we would like to go to.
So I can really see that you have put in a lot of effort in really making to happen this thing the way you want it to happen. So I'm just wondering, like, you would have had a time to sacrifice a lot of things for it, like your personal life and maybe your relationship. So would you like to talk about these things, that what were the major things that had to be sacrificed from your end? And what are the things that you really wish you could have done had you not been doing this?
So initially, I mean, I had to put in a lot of effort. So during the first 3.5 years, I mean, I used to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that was during the initial years of my master's and PhD.
Yeah.
And I wish I had spent a little more time with my batchmates and lab mates, socializing. So I had absolutely no social life during the initial part of my PhD, and that generally catches up to you during the later phases. So during the initial years, you should certainly create a social circle and a support system. So yeah, I mean that's one of the major things that I think I have sacrificed, the social life.
That's a great point. I think having the support system is such an important thing, especially in the PhD when you're doing a PhD. And I'm very hopeful, like the way you are working this app, TreadWill, that might also not become like a support system per se, but give you, of course, the resources to, as you are saying, think about how my mind is working in a way. It might also improve the mental health of PhD students as well. So that thank you for being our support system as well, Arko.
But I see that you had the guts to take something where you didn't have a background knowledge of and leading it to a great success where it's standing today. But I just want to know, like when you were starting this, did you have any backup plan, like in case something goes wrong or in case something doesn't work the way you guys are expecting it?
Right. Well, I mean, I did have B.Tech from a good college, and what does is that you always have a safety net.
Right.
If this doesn't work out, then I can always fall back to getting a job.
Right.
So it's not like my life will be ruined or career will be ruined or something. I mean, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I'll get a job. So, but if it does work out, it can help some people. So I thought it was worth a shot. So I kept working on it.
That's very inspiring.
Definitely. And thank you for that, Arko. This is amazing what you have done with the app. So, you have been in the field of studying the human brain for quite some time now, right? So what message do you have for our listeners about the importance of mental health from, a scientific point of view, if you say?
Well, I mean, obvious answer is take good care of your mental health. Even the mainstream media is also covering or getting more articles out about mental health during the pandemic. It is gradually getting into the public conversation more and more. And as these athletes, like during the Olympics, Simone Biles didn't do that. So, and I think the budget also, it was mentioned, Indian budget that was announced just last week. There was a brief excerpt, some talk about mental health. So, I mean, it's great that it is getting into the public conversation gradually, and at an individual level, I would say that it's the most important thing, especially for children and adolescents, because that's the time generally when the onset happens of disorders. Although it takes a longer course and the symptoms start appearing more and more in the later stage, in the young adult stages. But for children and adolescents, it's very important that they get the mental space to have a healthy childhood and adolescent phase.
Right. No, that's great. So, Arko, several times during our conversation, I realized that you touched upon the concept of physical health going hand in hand with mental health. So, I was very curious to learn if you have any insight about that correlation, if you have found something, during your studies about that.
Well, it's not from our studies per se, but there is already existing literature that says that, physical health, if you take good care of your physical health, like there is a correlation with aerobic exercise.
Right.
So if you do like 15 to 20 minutes of aerobic exercise every day, or if I remember correctly, it was like 3 to 4 times a week, then that is sufficient to give you a good mental health. But it's, as long as something drastic doesn't happen, as in if there is stress, then just exercise wouldn't work. But given everything is more or less okay in life, keep exercising, take good care of your health.
Thank you for sharing those very nice advices. Definitely very, very helpful.
Thanks for having me.
But did you have any correlation, Arko, with anybody who shows a particular stress symptom, and also like when he's overexcited, like when he's passing through its happy phase and bad phase? Do people who overreact to their phase of happiness are also the one that overreact to their phase of sorrowness, or is there any correlation between them?
So there is one. This depression is also known as unipolar depression.
Yep.
As in, there is just a phase of depression.
Yeah.
What happens in bipolar is that there are phases of high. When you get very excited, you sleep a lot less. You have a lot of ideas. You take up a lot of projects. You take risky decisions.
Right.
And then once that phase wears out, you go gradually into a phase of depression.
Right.
And then that continues for a while. And then you keep cycling between these two phases.
Okay.
Whether there is a correlation, I'm not really sure between a person who overreacts to happiness and sadness. That I'm not.
So thank you, Arka, very much again for educating us and our listeners.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was highly enriching experience learning about the app and also its implication on mental health. We wish you all the very best in your professional and personal endeavors. And
Thanks.
Our listeners can stay connected with Arko through his email ID and social media links available in the description box, and also learn more about the TreadWill app, and we have put in the link as well. And please do share your feedback with us on biopatrika.in@gmail.com as well.